The beginner stage is wild. Those first couple years, people are crashing a lot, and it hurts.
How does this compare in real life to what I see on TV?
I don't think TV gives it any justice, to be honest. It takes years and years and years of experience to like get to that point where it's just like where the public look at it and they're like, well, I could do that.
It definitely, like, right, to me, looking at it from the outside, I'm like, all right. So it's four dudes, they start running, they jump in the sled, and then they just go down the track.
The sleds are very difficult to drive. And that's just the easiest way to put it. They're finicky. They have like a personality. You have to and you're not so much driving the sled like you would drive a car. You're just trying to guide the sled down the track. But if you misguide it, you'll end up on your head and it can hurt. Um, and so I think that most people, they see the sled, not making many errors, couple taps here, maybe a skid there. But for the most part, it looks quite easy. But what we're actually doing in there is just these finite movements the whole way down the track to obtain that perfect line.
How do you even get to your level? Like, it doesn't seem like something that would be very conducive to, like, all right, it's my first time. And then you crash and you crash and you crash. Like, how, it doesn't seem like there's a beginner stage.
The beginner stage is wild. In bobsleigh, there's no way to slow the sled down that much. And so when you're starting to learn how to drive, you we give you some theory or when I first learned, I walk down the track with a coach. I try and memorize which way the curves go. That way I don't get lost down the track. And then I'm trying to memorize what steers I need to do in each corner because the way I drive now is very based off feeling of pressure in my body, the feeling of what the sled is doing. But when you're first learning, you don't have that feeling in your body. So you're just steering based on a program that someone gives you. And most times those first couple years, people are crashing a lot and it hurts. And it's hard to find people to jump in the back because they're like, screw that. I don't want to get in with you, man. Like, I saw what happened last time. That learning curve, it's very difficult. And we see a lot of athletes come into the sport, but it's really difficult for athletes to stay in the sport.
So when we talk about like driving a bobsled, I don't actually know what that means. Like, I have no idea what you're doing.
They used to have a steering wheel actually back in the day, but they found that if you turned left with a steering wheel and then you needed to turn right, this takes a lot of time to like go from turning left to turning right. And some of the steers we have to do are very quick. Uh, and so they graduated from a steering wheel to two handles, just like this. And basically, these handles are connected to the front axle of the sled. And if you pull right, the front runner blades will turn to the right. And if you pull left, they turn to the left. And then we can be a lot quicker on our steers to go from right to left because they're independent of each other. We don't have to, but we're not really like cranking steers so much like you would in a car. If you think like we're going quite fast, right? So if you're driving down the highway at 120 kilometers an hour, 100 or on some tracks 150 kilometers an hour, which is over 90 miles an hour. If you're driving down the highway at those speeds, you're not going to be, making some severe turns, right? So it's all very kind of soft and smooth turns that we're making, and the the secret is more about timing, not so much on how much you're steering, but on the point in which you're steering in the track. And so timing is very important, more so than the amount that you're steering.
Just for kind of my understanding, right? Like, if you didn't steer it at all, is this thing just like bouncing off the sides the whole way down?
Yeah, it's sliding off of corners, it's hitting the roof, it's banging you're skidding, you're banging walls, you're gonna end up on your head somewhere down the track.
It just seems like it would really hurt.
Yeah, it's not fun. Loud too when you crash. It's loud and it hurt, and it hurts.
What do you do when you crash? You're just like, ah, fuck.
Yeah, you hide.
Hope the guy in front of you or behind you is taller, I guess.
Yeah, basically. In format, it's very difficult to hide because there's like if you ever get the chance to look inside a bobsled, there's not a whole lot of room, and there's some cool pictures that you can see on the internet from Olympics or World Championship races of what a four-man sled looks like with the athletes in it from above, and it's like we're crammed in there. It's just like it's small and there's no room. And so, when I'm driving down the track, I've got my teammate behind me and he's kind of squished up, you know, behind me here. And then I've got the cowling in front of me. And so if we crash, I'm just like, the best I can do is go from here to here. And it's not very much. My head's gonna get hit a couple times, and my shoulder's gonna get burnt maybe a little bit, because there's quite a lot of friction on the ice, and people can get severe burns to their skin to the point where I know people that have had to get skin grafts from other parts of their body because that yes because that burnt the skin off of their shoulders.
But then if you crash, right, as the pilot, do the other three guys, or do they just like, way to go, man? Because it's basically how does that conversation in the bobsled go after? Because it's not like the guy in the back is the reason that you crashed. Like, how does that conversation go?
Yeah, it's tough. It's like, hey, sorry guys, that was my mistake.
Everybody looks like a running back. Is there a reason that everybody kind of looks like that?
Yeah, like we've got to get this sled moving fast, and they say there's three things to being successful in the sport of bobsleigh. You need to push fast, drive good, and have good equipment, like good sled. And the first part of it is pushing fast, because by the time everyone jumps in the sled, if you're already in last position, you can't, no matter how good your equipment is or how good of a driver you are, you just can't pick up those places down the track. You can pick up a few spots, but definitely not from last to first.
So how different are most tracks generally the same, or can tracks kind of vary pretty wildly?
Yeah, there is a lot of variance, to be honest. Some tracks are similar, but they all have their own personality as well. When a track is built, there is some regulations, or there's some rules that they have to build within. There has to, can't be too long or too short. It can't be too steep. There has to be certain amount of turns and certain types of turns as well. But for the most part, those regulations are quite open, and you can make a track like totally, totally different. You get to a track like Lake Placid in upstate New York, and it's wild. Like that track is like, hold on. You get to the bottom after a good run and you're beat up. The guys in the back are like, man, I know it was a good run, but I'm feeling it back here. Like you got to hold on, and you can tell the difficulty of a track by how much noise is in the warm up hut at the top of the track, where all the athletes, just that's where we are before we go and drive our sled down the track. Like all international athletes, we're in this one. It's like a locker room, but less fancy, and we're all in there together. And if it's a difficult track, nobody's talking. It's very serious in there. There's a lot of concentration. People are like looking at each other and giving them a like, hey, all the best kind of thing. But if it's an easy track, people are joking around and people are playing games and laughing and carrying on and, planning what they're doing this weekend and all this kind of stuff. So it's hilarious to see the difference.
What's the hardest track?
Typically, there's three tracks that everyone talks about in the world that are the hardest tracks. It's here in Whistler, BC, Lake Placid, in New York and Oldenburg in Germany.
So what are the other people in the are they just basically they push and then they're just hanging out? Or are you kind of telling them like, hey guys, lean left, lean right?
Yeah, you got it. They push and they get in, and that's it. Now, I don't want to dumb it down too much like that because their job is extremely important. And then getting into the sled, there's not a lot of room in there, right? So getting four big guys to get inside this sled, this tiny little sled, and sit in a good aerodynamic shape is a lot harder than you would think.
So how do they decide like who gets in second, third, fourth? Is it just based on height?
No, not always based on height. It's usually based on your physical attributes as an athlete. So typically the bigger, stronger athletes that aren't as fast are helping get the sled moving and like breaking that inertia, so to speak, and then getting in. And the faster athletes are the ones that are getting in last.
How far is it from like once you start to once you get into the sled?
It's roughly around 50 meters, give or take.
Oh, that's farther than I thought it was.
Yeah, it depends on how steep the track is, right? So some tracks are very flat, and so you push for longer because you don't ever reach that speed where you're like, well, I can't keep up anymore. And some tracks are really steep where it's like you gotta push and just get in. And so I don't know how far I run, but I have this like built-in pedometer in my brain that just a number pops up when I get in the sled, and I know how many steps I took. And in a in a track that's really steep in format, I'm taking 12 or 14 steps.
Is that how like everybody in the sled does it, right? Like just throwing out numbers. The first guy takes 12. The second guy takes 16. Other guy takes, right? Is like, is everybody counting like I take this many steps, then I get in?
No one's usually counting. It's based off of when the pilot gets in, basically. So if I get in, then the guy that's sitting number two behind me usually takes like he'll see me get in and then he'll react to that. Okay, now on my next cycle, I'm gonna get in. And then the number three guy will be like, oh, I saw the number two guy get in, so on my next cycle, I'm gonna get in. And then it usually is 2 or 4 steps later.
Are you ready for some harder slash listener submitted questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's start with the easy one. How do you feel about Cool Runnings? Is Cool Runnings the only bobsled movie that exists?
Well, there's more bobsleigh movies. I was actually in a documentary. It's kind of like a bobsleigh lifestyle documentary. Um, and so it's not the only bobsleigh movie, but for the most part, and I kind of even cringed when I said, like, oh, I was, that's how I got into the sport is because I watched Cool Runnings. It's because at times it can devalue our sport because the athletes that are in the sport they're so freaky and it's crazy how athletic they are. And then when we get a reference towards Cool Runnings, which is a great film, and it's really brought a lot of attention to the sport, and it continues to do so over the years. Sometimes it can just devalue the level of competition that we have in the sport.
It's a love-hate relationship. I get it.
Yeah.
Favorite piece of bobsled or lingo?
Ooh, there's lots of lingo in the bobsleigh world, and we have a lot. We have like our own language here in Canada that we use a lot. And I would say that we use this word rinse. We used to use it all the time, and you could just interchange it with whatever you want. Like, man, I rinsed that run, as in that was a good run, or I just got rinsed on that run, as in I had a bad run.
Worst crash?
Ooh, yeah, I had a really bad crash in 10 years ago in 2012 in on this difficult track in East Germany in Altenburg. where I went through the roof of the track. Like I crashed my sled and we're upside down and we hit the roof, which is, the roof's there just to keep sleds inside the track. And yeah, we hit it and we actually like pierced through the roof at 120 kilometers an hour. And we kind of got stuck in the metal structure of the roof. And it basically like can opened the sled. And there's a lot of wood up in there and a 2x4 impaled me. And I'm saying this with like a smile on my face jokingly, and I look at your face and you're like, what the
Like,
heck? It definitely was worse than what I'm portraying it to be, but I feel like that's the only way I can talk about it without, getting into the moment too much. And yeah, it was a really
yeah.
bad crash. Um, and I was out for many months, and so were my teammates. And typically that never happens. That was kind of like one of those freak accidents that happened. But yeah, I was impaled. I broke my nose and was impaled by a piece of wood through my butt and into my back, and made a full recovery though. And three of us out of the four in that sled 2 years later competed at the Olympic Games. So pretty pumped about that.
Damn.
Yeah,
Dude,
man, it
what
was
was that
wild.
first run like then like after that? Were you holy shit, am I gonna do this again? I'm sure 10
Yeah,
years ago, like
I
you're
did.
sick about talking about it, but
No, not particularly, but my first round back, I did it at a very easy track with my coach, who jumped in the back, and it was just the two of us there on Valentine's Day, actually, and yeah, we ripped down the track, and I was like, oh, it's just like riding a bike, no problems. But definitely for years after, I struggled a lot with some anxiety around it and some PTSD and stuff like that, and it was just things I had to overcome with my coaches and support stuff. And even going back to that track, every time I go back there to race, there's always some of those feelings there. And it's always brought up too, and I do my best to, you know, put those feelings aside until after I'm done. But, inevitably they're going to creep in. But we've had some great results on that track since then. And every time I go there, I'm really excited to race there, because generally we do pretty well there now.
not to bring it up again, but like who's got the best chant? Because I know of the chant from Cool Runnings. Like, does everybody have a chant? Or do you guys
Oh
just go
yeah.
now?
No, people have a chant, like sometimes there's like some slaps like this, some fist pumps, like people put their hands in and it's like 1, 2, 3, whoop, or whatever it is. The chant that I had for the last few years is we'd put our hands together and I'd say kind of quiet. I'd say what time? And then the guys would say game time. And then I'd say what time? Game time. And that's what we would do. But I would say the best chant. Whew, actually, I saw this Austrian skeleton girl racing last week here in Whistler, and it's just her and her coach, and she like punches him like boom, and then slaps his hand like this, and it's this little girl. She's probably like 5'5", 120 pounds or something, and he's just standing there like big guy. He's a Olympic silver medalist, and she's kind of shaking on the line. She's like ready to go,
He's
and then
fucking
the
ready.
light goes green and boom, slaps, puts the sled down and goes. And I'm like, whoa, this girl is fired up.
I'll end on this one. It's kind of funny. So when you go out to eat or you go hang out with the other guys on the team, how close do you guys sit together at restaurants? Like, are you so used to just being bunched up that you're all like, why are those four guys on
Classic.
one side of the booth? Like, oh, that's the bobsled team.
Oh man, you know, I wanna keep the this fairy tale going, and I'll say, yeah, we sit right next to each other. We even strip down to make sure we're in our lycra, in that spandex. We just sit there next to each other because we love it. We love getting in there, squeezing ourselves in. It's not unusual. Like when we're in the car, and if there's the back seat's open and there's only two guys sitting back there, no, we sit together. We don't sit on either side. We're gonna sit together.
All four in the front, right? Like,
That's it. Yeah, we got that bench seat. We just sit in there. It's tight like this.